I hope you're doing well. It has been one of those days. In fact, it's been one of those weeks where I really just want to sit down with a drink and have a conversation. So we're going to have another Storytime episode here on the channel. And this one, you might have noticed the title was Sleeping in My Car, which sounds like a bit of a weird story, but trust me, it's an interesting one. At least I think so. It's one that I want to share with you at some point or not. Needless to say, there have been countless moments throughout my career where sleeping in my car was the best, most feasible, most probable option for me. And so let's talk about what it takes to make your dreams come alive. Let's talk about some of the most stressful situations I've ever been in and why, when I didn't have the money to do what I needed to do, I didn't have the resources or the time or the ability to pay for a hotel or a room or have an alternative option, I chose to do what it took in order to get to where I am. But first, this is going to be Four Roses, a single barrel, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. A friend gave this to me for the holidays. I have a little bit of simple syrup in here. The ice has been melting for a bit. I'm going to be honest, I don't mind. I know it's slightly sacrilegious, but touch of simple syrup. I like a sweeter bourbon anyway, and I just wanted something not to try or to taste, but just to enjoy for the story. Chills it immediately, makes it automatically palatable, so that I'm not struggling through words as I talk to you. So, there's been a few situations in my career where I have chosen or willingly opted into sleeping in my car. I have a 2008 Kia Rio. It's the only car I've ever owned. I have a perfect driving record on it. And it has about 2,300, something about language. 200,000 and how do you say that? 230,000 miles on it? That's how you say that. So it's the only car I've ever owned. I've had it since I was about 17, 18, 19. My dad drove it for a while. I purchased it from him in college. It has been a powerhouse of a little car. I have crossed the country in it. I've not gone as far as California, but I've gone up and down the East Coast multiple times. I've been down to Texas, out into the Midwest. It is an incredible little car that has, for somehow, survived the journey. It is also a small car. It is not a big vehicle where you can fully stretch out, and I have always kept a pillow and a blanket in the back or a cloak that I can wrap myself up in, and I have gotten so comfortable and so used to stopping at rest stops, hotel parking lots, church parking lots, wherever you have to, so that one, if I am in a position where I'm driving somewhere and I don't want to continue driving while I'm sleepy, I'll pull over and take a nap and continue driving. But that's not the interesting part of the story, right? That's just being safe on the road and trying to be responsible when you're doing 10 to 15-hour car trips. The conversation I want to have is actually in correlation with the other channel that I have. It's in correlation with Quackalope, and it's in correlation with my career before Quackalope as a full-time wedding photographer. So I'll start with I'll lead up to the most interesting story. When I was a full-time wedding photographer, there was a point where I was transitioning the business from Kentucky up to Washington, D.C. And so I needed to maintain the bookings that I have in Kentucky, because I'd already agreed to them, I'd committed to them because business was going well. But I still needed to start booking weddings or second shooting or working with people up in the Maryland, Virginia area. Because repositioning or transitioning a photography business is a lot of times built on the relationships you have, the people that you know. It's that mid-transition style where I didn't want everything I was booking to be back down in Kentucky because then there was no reason for me to be in D.C. But my partner at the time was going up there for grad school, working on her PhD. I was supporting her along the way, and so I was the one that was mobile and able to bring money in and support both of us, pay rent, everything like that. So there was one summer, or 1 year, really through October, where I booked 45 weddings. Throughout September and October, I had every single weekend double or triple booked, and those weddings were spread across 9 different states. So that meant that there were some days where I was, in the DC area on Friday, left for a Kentucky wedding on Sunday, meaning I had a stretch of maybe 15 to 24 hours to make a 11-hour trip, depending on where the wedding was. And these weddings were spread throughout the entire region. And so I quickly learned and found out that booking a hotel would not only eat into my cost, but also heavily reduce the amount of travel flexibility that I had, right? Because you have check-in time, you have check-out time, you have to get to a certain location. And so I just buckled down. I had to transition my business. I was focused on booking as much as I could, but doing so as responsibly as I could, and I just committed to being on the road. I mean, there was probably a month and a half where I was on the road more than I was home, easily. And so I hit the road traveling from Kentucky to Maryland to Pennsylvania, back down to the Kentucky area, some weddings in Tennessee, some weddings up in the New York State area, just traversing this location. And throughout that process, I became very comfortable sleeping in my car because it was the best option that I had. I became very comfortable at rest stops and doing what it took, but I also was able to put aside some money, make sure we saved up, transition the business, build relationships. I mean, you talk about or you think about what it takes to actually make something work, and I've always reverted to I will work harder, do more, push myself to the very limit because I enjoy that process. Now, not everyone else does, but if you actually want to build a business that is beneficial, sustainable, there is a point where you're choosing what sacrifices you're making and what decisions you're doing, what you're willing to do to succeed. The first story I talked about getting my first photography equipment and sleeping on park benches and on people's couches throughout the summer in order to get that first camera. And so this is sort of a follow-up or a continuation of that journey, right? The next step that I took was traveling across the United States, shooting weddings at any price range. I mean, I was booking weddings for $500 to $800 up in the DC area because I needed to build those relationships. Or I was second shooting, which pays a different or less in some regards. And so I was willing and able and committed to doing whatever it took. But that conversation was also a little bit easier. Because in the context with being a photographer, with being a wedding photographer, there's a paycheck at the end of that journey. Now let's bridge over to something that didn't have a paycheck associated with it when I was building it. When I started building Quackalope, I was on a reoccurring contract. So as a freelancer, I was on a reoccurring contract with a client who dropped me about 2 weeks before Gen Con started. So I was establishing Quackalope. I'd sacrificed a lot of my other business contacts, so I wasn't doing weddings anymore. I wasn't doing as much commercial work. I was mainly just being paid to be available and show up for this client. And we'll get into that story another time. I lost about $30,000 to gain about 20,000 subscribers. It is a worthwhile story, but not the one we're talking about today. So I ended up having a gut check moment. I knew what my dreams were. I knew I was pursuing Quackalope. I knew I was pursuing this industry. I wanted to pursue what made me happy. I wanted to build a community. I wanted to do YouTube. I wanted to invest in my own ambitions and dreams. I was single at the time. The relationship that I had came to an end, and that for a long time was sort of my trajectory. That was my future, right? And so when that pulled away, I really had to determine and establish, what do I want out of life? What am I willing to pursue and willing to sacrifice for? But with about 1,000 subscribers, maybe 1,200 subscribers on YouTube, no money coming in through Quackalope whatsoever, and the lack of a secure or stable career or job, that carpet being pulled out from under me was a massive gut check. And I determined I was still going to go to Gen Con, the biggest board game convention in the United States. I determined I was still going to go to Origins, which was the first convention I ever went to as Quackalope. I didn't have a hotel room. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on items or games or superfluous stuff. I had no money coming in. I had a dream I was pursuing, and I had debt in the bank. I'm not even talking positive. I mean, I was maybe enough to pay rent for a month or two, and then credit card debt out of my ears, right? And that continued to pile up through the next 6 months or so. I mean, it was a really, really hard situation. And, I never would have talked about it at the time. No one knew I was sleeping in my car at the time. But you flash back, right, to where we are now, to what it's taken to get here. And it's a story that I'm excited about. It's a story that I'm proud to share. I drove down to Gen Con, took a shower at the local gyms there, which the Anytime Fitness that I had a subscription to, and buckled up and slept in my car in a parking garage every single night of that convention. And I would go to sleep at midnight. I would wake up at 5 a.m. I would leave my car, put on my camera backpack, and spend the rest of the day shaking hands, saying hi, being a human, building relationships and connections. And no one knew. No one knew I had this pit in my gut, this feeling like I didn't know where I was headed. And I'm just part of this conversation is I'm just way too stubborn for my own good. So I stubbornly approached it. I said, I'm doing this. I believe in it. I'm not willing to allow you to sacrifice my dreams. But I'm also realistic. I can't go into debt. I can't spend more money. I don't have the resources. And so I pulled up in my 2008 Kia Rio. I have some video footage of me vlogging from inside the car that I've never shared with anyone. I pulled up, I parked in a Myers parking lot for a period of time, I believe, and or maybe it was a Kroger parking lot, and I parked in a parking garage for a period of time, and I just hunkered down and slept in my car, and then drove to the convention, or left my car and walked to the convention every single morning. I'd still be willing to do it today. I mean, it's not the most comfortable thing to do, and hopefully, in the future, it won't be the thing that I have to do. But I'm proud of moments like that. I'm proud of moments where I was willing to pay whatever price I had to pay to continue pursuing my dreams. It's never easy to be in that position. And I felt like crap. I mean, I really didn't know what the future held for me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a lease that I had to continue paying for many months forward, and I had little to no money coming in. But I was willing to bet on myself. I was willing to commit to my dreams and risk or sacrifice a large degree, my own well-being to some degree, in order to try to make those dreams happen. And we're still on that journey. This channel's only at a couple hundred subscribers. I'm super excited about where it is and where it's going, and I'm enjoying the process, but let's be honest about where we are. We're on the road, right? I'm still at a point where I'd comfortably sleep in my car if it was a opportunity or if it was a necessity in order to pursue what I'm going after. So, that's story time. That is sleeping in my car. The reason this is on my mind, mustaches. It's all the bourbon in them. The reason this is on my mind is approaching April, I will be moving out of this location. Now, I may get an apartment, or I may just sort of move into my car full-time for a period of time, traveling across the country, meeting with a few people depending on the state of the world, and visiting parks, telling stories, doing what I've been practicing to do for a while now. But it's on my mind, right? What sacrifices are you willing to make? How far are you willing to go to prove or demonstrate or be the person that is willing to tell the story no one else is? It's a curious conversation. I have the luxury of being single, of being out of debt now, which is I never want to go back into debt. We'll have to talk about that sometime too. And having a foundation that I can rely on or trust in, right? A model that I'm willing to pursue, but sometimes you have to determine what that risk is, what that sacrifice is, and ask yourself realistically, are you willing to pay it? Now that I've slept on park benches to get my camera equipment, now that I have traveled across, 45 weddings in 9 states, multiple every weekend, one after another, now that I've gone to conventions and slept in my car and woken up and been a human and been a person and been motivated and driven, I now can look at situations like that approach and say, I'm willing. I'm able to do that. I'm committed to that journey. But there's always a point where you have to start. So that's what I'm thinking about. What is approaching me in the next 3 months? What am I willing and able to do? What is the best decision to make? And I'll be having that conversation with you all. My history predicts that I will do one thing, that I will pursue my dreams unrelentingly. But every time you're faced with that decision, it is always one that must be made. I don't just ambiently pursue my dreams. It's never been the case. It's always been a determination, an analysis, and then a commitment. So, I appreciate you being here. I'm back in the studio now, and I'll see you next time.